Did you think that learning a bunch of scales was going to help you solo like Slash, and that it would be easy? I did. I had to learn a ton of scales in a very short amount of time when I was studying at university. It was overwhelming, to say the least. Eventually, I figured out a faster way to learn and memorize them that actually made my solos sound more musical as well. And now I can pick out all the tasty notes just like Slash without even thinking about it. I wish I'd have known this sooner. But since then, I've helped nearly 600 guitarists learn scales easier, faster, and in a way that actually improves their solos and confidence when improvising. And to help you do the same, here are 5 things that I've learned about scales that'll help you avoid the mistakes 99% of guitarists make, and it will save you a ton of time. Lesson number 1. Early on, I was told by a guitar teacher that
if you want to be a proper guitarist, you've got to learn every single scale. Now. Go and do it now.
So I looked up all the different possible scales and I had a list longer than my arm. There were all sorts of scales that I'd never even heard of with weird names. Some of them I couldn't even pronounce. Is it Locrian? 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 I didn't know where to start and I was so overwhelmed. But worst of all, I had no idea of how these scales actually helped me come up with solos like Slash. And I started to feel like I was never going to be good enough and I wanted to quit. But then I stopped and thought, does Slash actually know all of these scales? And does he use them all? So I dissected all of his albums, all of his solos, and it turns out Slash's most iconic solos come from just 3 scales. That's it. So that just proves that you don't need to memorize every single scale in the world to be a good guitarist. In fact, across his entire career, he pretty much only uses 5 or 6 in total. So lesson 1 is, instead of thinking about learning every possible thing that there is to learn on the guitar in one go and getting overwhelmed and burning out, focus on the main scales that Slash uses, or the ones that you feel like you want to incorporate into your playing, and just master one at a time before moving on. And suddenly, things are going to feel more manageable and you can actually enjoy playing again. And at the end of this video, I'm going to show you exactly which scales to start with and the ones that Slash favours the most. Lesson number 2. For years, I kept running into the same problem. Every solo I played started sounding exactly the same. No matter what backing track I used, I'd end up playing the same licks, the same bends, the same patterns. My playing was boring and predictable. There was nothing that made it sound like me, and I couldn't make it sound like Slash either. And I remember thinking, have I just hit my limit? Is this as good as I'm gonna get? Then one day, I was watching Slash play, and I noticed in every solo, he was playing all over the neck. Meanwhile, all of my solos were coming from just one position, the first pentatonic box. I was literally trapped in that shape. Eventually, I learned that for every scale, there are 5 shapes that connect together, so you can play that scale anywhere on the neck. And then suddenly, everything clicked. Each position feels different under your fingers because the notes are in different places. So naturally, you phrase differently and you start discovering new ideas, new melodies, new bends, and new ways to connect your ideas. And that was the moment that my solos started to sound more melodic, more varied, frankly, more fun to play. But word of warning, instead of trying to memorize all 5 at once and getting overwhelmed, like in the step before, just focus on 2 shapes at a time. I recommend starting with shape 1 and shape 4. Now, if you don't know what the positions are or how to find them, how to learn them, the fretboard trainer shows you exactly where they are in the fretboard, in any key. It also helps you learn them in the fastest way possible. Lesson 3. When I first started learning scales, I thought I was doing everything right. I'd run up and down the fretboard over and over again, thinking that one day they'd just stick. And if you've tried this as well, you'll know that it doesn't work. The moment I changed key or position, everything just fell apart. My fingers knew the patterns, but my brain had no idea what I was actually playing. And it was just muscle memory and completely useless when I wanted to improvise, because all that came out was those running up and down of the scales. Slash doesn't rely on robotic muscle memory. He actually knows where every note is, and he's not thinking in shapes, he's thinking in sounds. And that was my big turning point. I stopped treating scales like boring exercises and patterns and started learning them in a way that connected the sound of each note to what I was hearing, learn where all the slash notes live, and that changed everything. Suddenly, scales stuck in my head a lot faster, not just my hands, not just muscle memory, and I can target any note easily, and I remembered them 10 times faster as well, and I can still recall them today, even if I haven't practiced them for years. So if you want scales to actually stick, you need to know where the scale degrees are, or the intervals, and start connecting each note to its sound, not just the shape. You should be able to pick out any interval, no matter what key or position you're in. Now, if you're struggling to commit scales to memory and learn them in a way that helps you play music, I show you my exact method, the one that I learned at university, to make them stick and stay in your long-term memory so that you can actually just start using them rather than spending time learning them over and over again. I show you that method in my How to Play Like Slash course. There's a link in the description. Lesson 4. When I was first introduced to modes, I was completely lost. I'm sure most of you have felt the same way. But every teacher I went to at the time said things like,
D Dorian comes from C major scale.
So I did what everybody does and just played C major licks over D minor chord progression. And it sounded terrible, obviously. It didn't sound like Slash, it just sounded like I was playing in the wrong key, or the completely wrong scale, which effectively that's what was happening. And that's when I realised the big mistake. And it seems obvious looking back, but I was still thinking in C major, but the core was actually D minor. Although we were using the same notes, it was a completely different sound. So I flipped my approach, and instead of thinking Dorian, Aeolian, and Phrygian as scales that come from something else, I started treating them as flavours from the pentatonic, whether that was the major or the minor. For example, D Dorian isn't the C major scale starting on D, it's basically a D minor pentatonic with a couple of extra decorations or notes added in. And that perspective just changed everything, and suddenly all the modes made sense. So D minor pentatonic, just those 5 notes. If you add the Dorian notes in, again, I'm not going to get deep into modes in this video and how to explaining them all, but adding those extra 2 Dorian notes in, I don't have to learn a completely different scale. I just add those extra 2 notes in to what I already know. And suddenly it takes on a completely different flavour. And that's exactly what Slash does. He's starting with a pentatonic and then adding the notes or the colour around those pentatonic shapes to shift the mood or the emotion. And that's what gives his solos so much character. And once I started thinking like that, my solos opened up as well. My note choices felt intentional, the music sounded more expressive, and finally I understood how to use modes instead of just memorizing them, and it made learning scales so much faster. And the lesson here is, if modes feel confusing for you, stop thinking where they come from and start thinking about the pentatonic bass, and suddenly they'll start to feel like music and not maths. If you want to go deeper into modes, my How to Sound Like Slash course walks you through it step by step, along with backing tracks as well. And there's loads more videos being added over the next few months, so it's definitely worth checking that out. And lesson 5. I never realised how scales related to improvising or writing solos, because whenever I used them, I thought the goal was to just use as many notes as possible, using all the notes of those scales. Like, that's never going to sound like music. If you listen to the best melodies of all time, they don't just go like this. So I'd cram in runs and throw in every single note there was, and yeah, it sounded awful. But then I started paying attention to how Slash uses scales. He's not racing through all the notes, he's actually crafting melodies. So he'll hit one note and make it sing with vibrato or bend until it cries, basically. You've probably heard this phrase, it's not the notes you play, it's the notes you don't play. And that's when it clicked for me. I stopped treating scales like a box of notes to tick off, and I started using them as a palette for melody and began mixing in a few Slash style licks, and suddenly my solos had meaning. They weren't just like a bedroom guitarist's scale exercise. And actually, oh, did I tell you this? I don't want this to sound weird, but I even remember at some gigs where people were singing the solos back after we'd finished playing.
These guys are absolutely unbelievable.
And that's when I realised I'd finally made the jump from playing scales to playing music. So lesson number 5 is, if your solos sound robotic or boring, stop focusing on every note. Think melody first and scale second. Try limiting yourself to 1 or 2 notes and use bends and slides and phrasing like Slash to bring those scales to life. So if you don't know where to start or which scales Slash uses to create the most iconic guitar solos on the planet, I recommend watching this video next, because I show you 3 of his favourite that make up over 85% of his music.